This is a really nice attempt, Owen. I think there's a lot of good things to say about it, and I mean, there are a few odds and ends and finer points of notation and phrasing and things like that I think would really help you out a lot. Um, I've just oh boy, I keep forgetting to put my other screen in the right place. Okay, so I have been sort of asking the question, coming up against this particular sound set and its sort of its defects as I see it. Which the thing is that it's not so much that I am trying to beat up on the entries or the people who use this sound set on the entries at all. It's more that I really regret what the sound set is doing to their entries to make them harder to understand for those who need the mock-up in order to understand what they're reading, right? Uh, so, so yeah. So I have, thanks to Sigbjörn reaching out to me in the comments under his video, I have found that this is Muse sounds, right? And you can really tell by the kind of the weird sound of the clarinets, the kind of very strange sound of the horns, and the way that, let's see, like when there's a sforzando, it kind of goes, it kind of there's like a sudden leap up in volume across the entire score, right? And so on. And then in other places where it gets loud, it suddenly jumps up, and then it jumps up again at the fortissimo and so on. And then like right here, this just sort of jumps out glaringly, and it really sounds like a very very clumsy tape edit, you know. So yeah, so look, the I think that whoever is working on Muse sounds, I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to get a very intimate sound and so on with certain instruments, but they don't. Those intimate sounds just do not work good in an orchestral context. Do you know what I mean? And certain aspects of the clarinet patch are just so wrong. Like the sound of the you should not be able to hear the sounds of the finger holes having the fingers lifted and put back down again. That is something, whenever I've recorded clarinet, I've recorded at like around a meter away, and you don't hear those sounds, right? Unless like the player is playing like niente or something like that, right? So yeah, so anyways, if the sounds, if somebody out there who uses Muse Score and Muse sounds could reach out to me and let me know whether or not there have been any significant changes to those, it would be really interesting to see, and I would love it if the MuseScore people checked out Sigbjörn's entry and this entry and so on, and listened to some of my critiques of that I have put down. But otherwise, I'm not gonna waste any more time on it. Now that I sort of nailed down the problem, and I'm gonna be talking to a friend of mine, a professor of music who is actually, I don't know if he's one of their consultant, but he very much is interested in the development of it, and I think he's made some key suggestions to them, and including one that I came up with a couple weeks ago. So we'll just see. It's a work in progress, and I feel that the people who are working on it, they have a lot of, I love the layout of some of these scores, and I love what the possibilities of it for like a very inexpensive and potentially beautiful looking score. But at the same time, I just feel like their team needs a bit more, a bit more of like the professional kind of person working on it. So, I'm too busy, but there are some people out there who could really work wonders with this, I think. Okay, so rant over. Now let's talk about Owen's particular score. So Owen, like once again, I feel like you've had a lot of really cool ideas. I'm going to make a couple comments here. You're doing horns in C and then horns in C basso, right? Which, like, you would not need to use horns in C basso unless you were doing some kind of like period approach, right? Okay, and if you're using a period approach, you shouldn't be changing Beethoven's harmony, right? So that's my first comment. There are just a lot of changes you make to his harmony that are kind of like lean towards a more modern or almost jazzy kind of outlook. And maybe those are errors in transcription. Do you know what I mean? Maybe you intended to do something else, but you changed one or two pitches and it ended up being a jazz chord, right? So, if that's the case, then, I understand in that perspective, not so bad. But, even at that, I think you could have used your horns more throughout this entire thing, right? And maybe it's just a question of confidence, right? But whenever you have something like this, F, C, F, those are pitches that are built right into the horn in F, right? As, like when you go C, G, C, that's also built right into it. Although, what is actually happening here? It's not C, G, C, it's C, F, C, right? So I think that you might have fallen into like maybe you did a copy paste of this to this and not a, transcribing. Yeah, because it's, the change of harmony here is not to go from an F to a C. It's to go from, an F root chord to an F chord with the with a dominant at the bottom, what we would call like a 6/4 chord, right? Okay. So just like there's a bunch of different little things like that. Perhaps misunderstandings on your part, perhaps not. Okay. So moving on to here, we've got a few, like, we're just going to talk about a few particular, like, general scoring comments before we jump into the actual evaluation criteria, okay? So here you're very careful to, like, show that this is the first oboe and the second oboe part is in rests. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. Or you could just write number 1, right? Which I think is much cleaner. Now here, we don't know who this is, right? Or who this is, right? So you were a bit careless in telling us which player is playing a single, like a single voice when that happens. So generally speaking, you would say number 1 or number 2 to tell us which player, right? Never write A1, right? Ever, ever, ever. A2 or A2 tells us that 2 people are playing a single voice, right? And then if it is not both players, but it's only one player, then you have to tell us which player that is, like whether it's player number 1 or player number 2, and just mark number 1 or number 2 over this, okay? Okay. There are some other things here, like these incomplete, like these slurs that like reach out kind of into nothing. Here you have a slur that slurs forward and then it slurs to another slur, right? So, and then here as well, right? So a lot of these things are just things you need to, it's just better proofreading. It could have been a situation I'm hearing from a lot of my participants that like they were just really under the gun as they got too closer to the deadline, and especially with these kind of later entries. Like when you see like entries that are later in the group of entries, that means that they came later in the entire, like whoever's like later in like this big stack of data brev entries, for instance. This would have been down to the last couple of days or the last few days or last week or something. So I understand if like the proofreading could have been a lot better. So yeah, so like here you have like the split voice, the rests, and the second voice is rests and first voice and so on. There's almost even no need to do that. Just write the number 1. And then here you've got like 2 voices seeming to telescope into one, this would be a situation where I would have separate stems, right? Number one stem going up, number two stem going down, and then these would both have there would be a stem going up and down on this one unison note, right? For instance, if that's what you intend here. Same thing here. If you wanted both of the pitches to go up to C. If you wanted just one horn playing on this, then this should be a separate voice, right? This should be second voice, stem pointing down, and then a rest under here, right? So there are all of these little things you need to finesse. If we do a second, or if we do another orchestration challenge, the thing that I'm thinking of is not quite so long and intense. So it would be a smaller start if I were to restart. Okay, so all of those little notes aside, Owen, now let's talk about the real nitty gritty here. Our evaluation criteria. So does the intro set the mood effectively? I mean, I feel so. It's nice. You have this little chorale of oboe and clarinets and so on. So just the thing you have to be aware of here is that, like, in terms of like perfection of timbral balance, starting the oboe on a low middle C and having it match the subtlety of the bassoons and clarinets in a more idealized register will be difficult for the player. Now, once they slur up to the F, everything will be fine. But I would actually, notice how this, like, you're slurring across repeated notes, right? It's also, it does happen in concert music. It's treated as like a semi-portato, like here when you have the second voice here, these repeated C's with a slur across them, and there'll be a kind of a gentle pulsing kind of a sound. Similar to a portato, but even a little less pronounced, but not a mezzo staccato. But it's still kind of unclean. Or unclean. Sounds biblical. I would actually split this into second voice stems pointing down with tenuto marks over them and a slur over them to show that it was portato, like it was definitely a portato. And then slurring over the top. And the same thing here. I would make this just into a straight portato here. And I think that's just much clearer. Okay. All right. So here I would say start the slur on the second beat, right? And that's just easier on the oboist too, right? Because they have to form a beautifully perfect middle C note that is as subtle and beautiful and as balanced as everything else that's just more effortlessly playing, like the clarinets and the lower winds. For them, getting to be beautiful and soft and subtle here is no big deal. But for the oboist, it just takes an extra effort. So I think it's just easier for them just to go C, F, right? So just start the slur here, and the same thing here. Just start the slur there, and then you don't have to worry about the, slurring across repeated notes. And then this I totally approve of, slurring from, slurring to the half beat in the middle of the bar. Da, ta, ta, ta. There's no need for you to do eighth note tied to a fermata. Just do this, right? Quarter note fermata over it, because they're not counting where to them it doesn't really matter what's going on. All that matters is that the first oboe player knows where to put their fermata, right? Okay, spelling check, cantabile. Okay, and then a little bit of double bass down here at the bottom, just sort of forming a triple octave, right? And this is, once again, this is a place where you could have brought in some very subtle pianissimo horns in F, playing like old notation, playing their low Cs, right? Then I think you would have a beautiful, rich, low register without it being too obnoxious. Okay, so does it set the mood effectively? I would say yes, because of the way that you used the winds coming up here, right? So you have this kind of callback to that timbre. Right. Okay, so now let's talk about the main theme. So does the melody start with elegance? So, all right, so So Owen, you may have missed some of my cautions in other evaluations and in some of my guidelines for scoring this piece, that you shouldn't just drop the piano's slurring onto the strings, right? Because I mean, what are you asking the first violinist to do here? You're asking them to do. Let's just say that they start with a down bow, so they're going to go down, up, down. Do you see? It's like this is a really, really long bow, and here you have a really, really, really long bow, and there's kind of no subtlety, no nuance. There's no emphasis of the downbeat, right? What if you just did a slur here, and a slur there, and a slur there, and then here, down bow, up bow, and then slur, 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 and then you would get up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Do you see what I mean? Like your string players, they don't need piano style slurs. They need slurs that show them where to move the bow up and down, and that is better than actually writing an up bow and a down bow mark. You never need to do that. The players know exactly what they're going to do. You only ever use up bow and down bow marks when there is some specific effect that you need. Like, for instance, all down bows on like some very, very emphatic notes, right? Or a row of up bows when you want the bow to sort of dance upwards, sort of virtuosically. So like otherwise, you just really don't need it at all. Okay, so yeah, and then here, like this could be portato as well, right? Like I was mentioning here, like when you have these slurred notes, same thing. Just put a slur across here and some tenuto marks, and then you get this kind of throbbing sound that blends in really well with these other slurs. So, and then this is really strange. Like, why not just slur to here instead of to here? So da or da ta, right? And then so this would be down, and then those would be up, right? Or you could slur by the beam group. So slur, slur, no slur, no slur, and then just the same way, slur the half bar, and then just do this all as one down bow, right? So yeah, so just you need to work some more on your on string scoring. So I recommend, after having watched this, and if you are still serious about this whole orchestration thing, which I sure hope you are, because you're doing some great work here, is just really, really go and read like Tchaikovsky's Tchaikovsky's Serenade for Strings, and Eine kleine Nachtmusik by Mozart, and the Dvorak String Serenade, and just really, really look at how the bowing is used. Also, Tchaikovsky's Suite Number 1, which is not just for strings, but the first movement has a lot of lessons there for how to write slurring for bowing, and any number of other works. And like in this period, Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, and so on, their symphonies as well, just looking at how Beethoven writes the slurring over it. Never, never, when you're transcribing piano music, just rely on the slurs of the piano part, okay? All right. And then here, like, you also have to think, okay, I've got a slur here, and then you got ta-ta, 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 up, down, up, or down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, right? So you're asking the cellist to have two different kinds of energy here. Like first this bon da yeah ta 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 ta, right? It doesn't really feel right. So I hate to get hung up in this one tiny little point here but I just really feel it's important, okay? Because I think that you have got some talent here, and I think you should really be focusing on certain things you may not be thinking of. Right? Okay. So, does the melody start with elegance? Were you to adjust things as I recommended, and were you to maybe add maybe slurring by the beam group here in your cellos, then I would say yes. Natural transition to octaves, yes. Expanding without clogging up, yes. Like, so the bones, the skeleton of the music there, but it's almost like the punctuation is missing. Like, I'm not seeing, like, it's like as if you were to write a paragraph of music for me which had no periods, no commas, no capital letters, and it was all just a big string of words, right? So you have to really watch out for those things. Okay, but otherwise, cool. And there's no need for you to go to mezzo piano, right? Piano is fine. Piano is a world. Piano is a universe, right? Mezzo piano is a blending tone, right? It's something that is, mezzo piano is something to put behind forte or mezzo forte, right? Mezzo forte is something to put behind forte. And it's also a place, like, it's also a dynamic that is on the way to somewhere, right? But just because piano music gets a lot of mezzo dynamics in it, that doesn't mean that is true for orchestral music. Like, does Beethoven need to start one of his symphonies on a mezzo piano or a mezzo forte? Right? Usually he's piano or forte. So yeah. So just piano is fine. There's you get everything you need to out of that dynamic in this particular instance. Right. So then here, I'm really happy that you left in the leggermente on the 16th notes. Right. That's so important. So important. A lot of people who, are who were very, very careful about their orchestration and really put in a lot of craft and experience and everything else, like left out the leggermente. Here you put it in. I think that's great. So, and here you got this like sort of harmony that you added in the back, and like both of these chords are not really, they're not common practice, right? So I would just say, just be careful if you're going to add harmony. Just really make sure that it is the kind that it agrees with the period. If you're going to go for the period, as we see here, right? Okay, but all that aside, you added your harmonic support. You didn't have a contrast with your theme, right? You stayed with strings. So your main theme in strings, the little aside here, the little comic aside in strings, and then the wrap up in strings. So you're really using strings for a lot of thematic entrances, except for here, which is really nice. Okay, and now once again we've got we're going on to the next thing. Do you have an emphatic color of line? That's my first concern here, and yes, you do. It's really nice. Oboe and violin. So is this a duet oboes? Is it one single oboe? What is it? Right, and then crescendo, and then suddenly your piano again. Crescendo to what? Right. These are orchestral players. They can't guess what everybody else's dynamic is. You have to tell them what is going to be the maximum amount of warmth, right? And I would say crescendo maybe by the fourth beat here, mezzo forte, right? So crescendo to mezzo forte, and you can just write, you don't need to put crescendo here, just write mezzo forte. And then piano subito, right? Make sure that the piano is underneath the first beat, not sort of drifting off here towards the second beat. So piano subito right away, right? So da 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 da, piano subito, right? Okay, then I think that this would all come together really well. So I mean, this is fairly much, it's a direct transcription of what the piano part is doing. Your, cellos doubled by bassoons, a little bit of double bass, an octave lower, and then you're adding your second violins here. I think you could even have your second violins just start together with the firsts. And then here you're just adding a little bit more weight with the violas and so on. I get it. But once again, you've got like you just have thrown the piano style slurring over the top, right? And it's just a really, really long thing. And then you're slurring to a slur, right? These should be two different things. The slur should stop. The previous slur should stop before the next slur, right? So, I mean, what would be better here? And here you're slurring into the downbeat. And so, like, we don't have the dig of the bow going ya da da da. You know what? You're going da. Where's the downbeat? Da 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 da. Wouldn't you rather have that boom? You know, that punch in the face on the downbeat. And you're not going to get that if you slur across it, right? Slur, downbeat. So up, down, up, down. You see what I'm saying? So it's so much better to just stop the slur here, stop this slur here, start a new one here, and maybe go like slur these triplets and slur those triplets. So you're going up, down, up, down. Do you see what I'm saying? So you get a nice downbeat on the beginning of the next bar, right? So yeah, so just really do not take any slurs for granted. Really plan them out. And that just brings up the next question of like you know, this is nicely scored out. I love the whole idea of the, you know, the oboes and the strings working together and the flutes an octave above and so on. Okay, so a couple things to think about. Just like before, you had piano starting note on a middle C. This is not a soft note for the oboe by any means. Even when it's controlled and the oboist plays it softly, it will still stand out. So if you really want this to be more subtle, then it would be better just to give these middle C's to the clarinet, right? Which like they can play them all day long, right? And very soft. So you could have oboe da da da, and you could have the clarinet go da da da. Yeah, and this is all fine. Bum bum bum. And it's not dun, dun, dun. It's dun, 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 right? So that should be an F, not a C. And this is, yeah. Okay. Yeah, because this chord here in the middle is an F chord, right? It's an F root chord, right? It's not it's, you know, the G is not part of it, right? Okay. But everything else aside, you know, I like the idea of, you know, the very, very subtle, like just using the contrast between the density of the scoring. You know, winds and strings, strings, winds and strings, strings. So that's all very cool. Going to the B section. The B section actually starting here. Right? And then you leave out the winds here. So that's great. Chord. And then so being aware, all right, like we're going to assume that we're still at a piano dynamic, right? Yeah, so here we're on the second page, HN, not HO, all right? HN in the capital, not a capital I, a small I, right? And here, I don't know if this is MuseScore or if this is you, but like MuseScore developers, if this is your default for abbreviating those instruments, shame on you. This should either be BN period or BSN period, right? And this should be HN, not HO. You know, it's what it's. This isn't Santa Claus, right? Okay, sorry, I'm not chewing out you, Owen. I'm chewing out MuseScore. Come on now. 2 ho and F. Come on. And in should always be a small. The I should always be small, right? Okay. All right. So now here you've got unison, first violins, oboes, and flutes, right? Da 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 ba da da. Yeah. So you know, just kind of the blend of the flute and oboe isn't so bad. That, you know, this is going to be weak down here. Anything below the D is going to be very weak for the flute. I don't know how many flutes this is supposed to be. Is this one flute? Is this a due? Is this a due? But I mean, it's a nice bright sound. right. And then here you've got this octave. I almost wish that you had somebody doubling this, right? Da 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 da. What if the oboe part just dropped, right? Da 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 ba 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 da ba. Do you know what I mean? And don't do this, all right? And don't forget that in the original score, it is a turn over a trillo, right? So that is that is like that is a shake before the trill. Da da da. So it's not da, it's da 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 da. Okay. All right. Complementary timbre, I should say. Horns and clarinets is pretty thick, right? It's so I think that it's not complementary, it's contrasting timbre. And then I would say if there was some way for you to dovetail into the bassoons, it would be better than just changing color here. Do you know what I mean? So like if you could have the clarinets walk down into, like if the clarinets could end here and the bassoons could continue, I think that would work out a little better. But this is cool. Da 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 with pum ba dum ba dum ba dum ba dum ba dum ba dum, which is oboes can play just absolutely beautifully, just really precisely. Yeah, and then just so this is some of the best part of the whole of your scoring so far. And then then you're just holding this. This very much influenced by Beethoven. And you got this yada da 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 da. Right, and da da dum da da dum da da dum in our clarinets and so on. It's just really really fun. You're spreading out the functions and so on. So being aware, I think that like having this sort of D sharp here, da 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 da, yeah. Yeah, sounding G sharp and then F. I almost feel like, I wish that it were the horn, that like the horn would continue, like at least first horn would continue going, right? So it would be D sharp, D natural. But in both cases, they're both stopped tones, right? However, if you use your C horn, right, then you could have G sharp, as a stop tone, and then G natural as an open tone, right? Ba da 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 da. Anyway, it's just an idea. So these pitches here in the bassoon could be played written an octave higher in C horns, going from stop to open, right? And that would be that'd have a really nice dig to it, right? And you wouldn't have to break the rules with your F horn here, right? And this is really lovely right in here. Yeah, so you really are keeping an eye on what's possible with your natural horn scoring. And you're spreading out, just like I'm saying, thinking ahead to the widening gap. You widen it, you fill things in. It's a little uneven in terms of the the way that you mark things. See, I see, you want these notes to sort of flare, right? But I think it would be better for everything to be for the dynamic to be piano, but for maybe to mark sforzando on the accented notes, right, rather than mezzo forte, because all that does is just make the horns hugely loud against this delicate tracery, right? Better to have everybody piano, but just the occasional accents on those pitches. Right? All right, and then here we're cooking with gas, right? And then see, you've used up, by putting that mezzo forte earlier, you've used up the surprise or the push. Yeah. Yeah, so, nothing impossible here. Kind of interesting. And I love the fact that you have bassoon trill and then unison violas and cellos. I think that you could you could go divisi with your cellos and add a little bit more bass support here. You could have a G, an octave higher than this G, right? So just like divisi, so G and a G without a trill, and then a D with a trill, right? Yeah, and then ending. Great. So now we're going to. Alright, so that's, yeah, it's kind of cool. Yeah, just, and I saw this in the last, coincidentally, in the previous evaluation by Douglas. I think it was. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But flute with clarinet, trading off with oboe and bassoon. Right. So that's a very cool idea. And then going to the strings. I don't think that you need this much weight. Right. I would say just the violas. Yeah, and then nice and fulfilling. Bum bum bum. Yeah, I don't even know if you need to do this. I think it could just be all first violins, and then have the seconds come in here. Bum bum bum. Da 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 da. And once again, just firsts here. Da 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 da. And you could this could just be flutes, if you'd like. I mean, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to vary the 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 sounds of single winds and then unison winds and so on. If I could just point out to you that that first flute here and clarinet, the clarinet even playing softly is going to swallow up a lot of what the flute is doing, and so are the violins. So like maybe it would be better to go to, well, I don't know, just leave it the way that it is. I don't know, but just like I would say, dovetail out of it. Just give a 16th note on an F, even if it won't be heard that well. And this should be a 16th note too. Right? Don't dovetail to a note of greater value than the one that the next instrument is going to play. Same thing here. Those should all be 16th notes. Yeah, and it's kind of fun. There's just sort of like tag team kind of thing happening here. And then bassoon. So do you really want this all to be separate notes? You really want it to be, right? Or do you want this bowing to be down up 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 down up? Or do you want it to be slurred? Da 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 da. Same thing with this. Ta 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 ta. You know what I'm saying? Do you really want these to be separate notes, or do you want them to be slurred? If you want them to be slurred, I would say, you could slur. I mean, to sing it the kind of the breakneck speed here. Maybe you could slur each 2 beats, each half bar. Might be a good way of working it out. And once again, if you the problem with doing this kind of dovetailing is that this pitch in the previous instrument ends up sounding louder, or not louder, but it ends up sounding longer, and it overlaps into this pitch. So that's not a clean dovetail, right? Alrighty, so and that takes us to so to the going to F minor. But instead of looking at this development section, why don't we jump ahead and compare the A, B, and C sections of this score with their recapitulation at E. And here we see that you've taken a really similar approach with your strings, your upper strings, but the lower strings are kind of just playing repeated eighths and so on. I'm not so sure. I mean, you could have just gotten the same thing with like a pair of half notes, or even just like a whole note with the little beamlet over the top to show that it was repeated eighths, or even just written them out. Do you know what I mean? Just to be clearer. Yeah, so I mean, it sort of has a nice sort of busier, more has more energy than before, just because of the just because of the increase in incidence of rhythmic elements. But other than that, you have a return, but you're building on the material a little bit, and that's good to kind of keep the energy up, especially after everything that has happened leading up to this. Now, I'll be talking about missing bars in a minute because I noticed some missing bars in here, and there are some coming up here. All right, so just watch out for that. And maybe you were transcribing and you dropped them. You didn't notice, or maybe you felt that they could be missing, right? But the thing you have to remember with these transcriptions is that a lot of people who know these works will feel their absence, right? So, so here we've got a contrast of clarinet and bassoon, right? Leggermente once again, great. Okay, but I don't feel that this harmonization, it's just not quite common practice, right? So just this needs a bit more work on it. And then here you don't have any kind of harmonic support at all, and I feel that that's actually a mistake, right? So either leave these horns out completely and just let this be a direct transcription of the piano part, or fix the harmony here and then add some elements maybe here in strings or very softly in bassoon or something. But yeah, I think that this just feels kind of nude after this, right? So I mean, I feel that there needs to be some kind of equivalent support, right, for it to feel more natural. Now this is interesting, like whereas the first time you just like used the existing slur, like here you just having all of these notes being played as single strokes under the bow. But then we see like the tail end of the slur, right? So maybe this is something MuseScore does. So yeah, so just, you know what I mean? I mean, it would be better for you to go, like if you're going to do slurs, it would be better to go slur, and then slur half the bar. Slur, slur. Do you know what I'm saying? Or just cut the slurs entirely and just have them just be individually articulated notes. Ta da da 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 ta ta ta. That works too. But if you do want this to be slurred, the problem with using the piano slurs is that I don't even know if you want a slur there, or if you are just using what was there and you didn't think about whether or not you needed slurs or what the effect of that would be on the instruments that were playing it, right? Okay, rant over. All right, so is there increased dynamic impact here? I mean, it's similar to what happened before, but like I think you're using your horns and your bassoons and middle strings more wisely here, I would say. I think it's nicely done, and that does lead forward to these chords. Bum bum bum, dun dun. I like the contrast between the tutti and the just the strings, and then right here you cut those two bars, right? And the problem is that like this doesn't dynamically follow on from what happened before. Like Beethoven gets there by steps, right? So you cut out step 3, right? So you just went from step 2 to step 4, right? So yeah, so really watch out about that. Maybe it's a transcription error. I don't know. But everything else aside, I think that it pretty much works. And then this is very nice. The contrary motion in your lower winds. That's nice. And then answered by the oboes. Okay, and then here we have like the same thing again. And so on. Yeah. So this is very similar, but there are some changes. Yeah. Do you really mean this? Do you mean these to be played twice? Is this supposed to be a tie? It just looks really weird. And then you're slurring to a slur, to a slur, to a slur, to a slur, right? Just make it one big slur if that's what you mean. Or, maybe just don't have any slurs. Just go ta, 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 ta. Or maybe make this a slur here, and this a slur there. And leave out the slurs everywhere else. Right, now, going forward into this you've got the clarinets taking the place of what the oboes did, sort of swapping functions. Once again, this could just easily be played on C horn, right? Or on F horn, right? So they could be playing this as a G sharp, right? You've got an extra horn here, right? So you could have one of your horns playing this as a stop G sharp to an open G written, right? Which sounding D flat to C. Right? Right, and then I like the expansion. Right, and like here you keep everybody piano. That's great. And then crescendo, forward, forte. Yeah, so this all works great. And you got a trill here. Trill in viola an octave higher than the bassoon. So I feel like that's not the strongest. Why can't this sounding G trill here in the second clarinet, right? For instance, why couldn't you do that and then also have like divisi cellos and have the top one do a trill in unison with the bassoon here, right? And is this a bassoons or just like the first bassoon? I would recommend, like in case of a trill, just really be careful about doing a trills in winds. Okay. All right, so yeah, and then just kind of the same wrap up. So that's really fun. All right, and then here we've got, flute and clarinet answered by oboe and bassoon. That's all good. And then the strings pick it up. Then you're really kind of doing what you did before. Then take the whole voicing up an octave in terms of the actual chords, but the functions of the instruments changing. Da, da, da. Yeah, and then strings, and so on. Yeah, I'm not so sure. I almost wish that you had da 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 da, and then what if you had just dovetailed on this B? So like the first violins kept going. Oh, by the way, this should say violins 1, violins 2, or it should just say 1 and 2. Violins, which violin is what? If you are only using, like, let's say you were only using second violins, violas, and cellos, how would I know which violin part this was? So yeah, so if you did the abbreviations here, then you need to watch out. If this is the standard way that MuseScore does abbreviations, shame on them. Sorry. Okay, so ending on a B, I would say, so just have this whole thing go to here and end on a B, and then have the seconds dovetail here, right, and conclude this. There's no need for this to trade to another part. Right? I like this little ending on a B, but it should just be a 16th. And yeah, that's kind of cool. You're going to the violas here and second oboe, and then second bassoon. Right. Yeah, and yep, yeah, and that's all really great. And I like the fact that you did the sort of the non-repeating second section, right? Which is it just like that's more typical of the way that the Romantic and modern era interpreted late classical, mid classical repeat structures, right? They would just leave out the repeat on the second half. So that all works for me. So now let's jump back to the D for development section. And by the way, I did notice that there are, on this page that there are some wrong notes and so on, but I don't want to get into it. It'll take too much time. Okay, so in the development section, I think that like the main thing that we need to think about a bit is like dramatic proportions, and we will get to that as we go. All right, so here we're starting off flute, oboe, clarinet, and octaves with octave first and second violins. Da 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 bum. So once again, with the flute being so low, doubled by oboe and first violins, it's just really not going to contribute very much at all. Right? And this we can slur better than this, right? And then there are no slurs, so yeah, that just needs a lot of cleanup. Yeah, so the flute and oboe will be more balanced here. Not it'll still be dominant. The oboe will still be dominant, and the strings will still want to swallow up the flute's tone, but it will play a role. Yeah, and I like the clarinet scoring in here. That's very cool. And then yada da 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 da, and I really love this, like having this an octave lower than it is in the piano score. That's very cool. And pluck. Oops. Sorry about that. It's very strange. Right. Okay. I hit the wrong button. It's my fault this time. Right. Now, couldn't this be a little bit stronger? If you look at the piano score, it is pianissimo on the previous notes, right? But then when he gets to here, like, he doesn't really say how loud that's supposed to be. And most pianists play it a little stronger, right? This is why I was really hoping that people would listen to Spencer Myer's recording or some other pianist recording, because usually they push a little leading into this forte, right? So, what if it were more da 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 ba da 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 rather than da 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 ba da da da? See, the jump is just huge here, right? It's just really suddenly shouting, and it's shouting over this G. So if this were, say, mezzo forte crescendo, right, then by the time we got to the G, then it would be strong enough to stand up over this, right? And then the transition to forte is just already taken care of. And maybe even crescendo here on these little back and forth notes. All right? And then this is all, balance is good. Yeah, and then this da 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 da. Yeah, and this all works fine. And you've got this da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum, and so on. Okay, and now from da-da-da-da-da-da, there are 7, 10 bars between here and here in the original piano score, right? Okay, and here you got, let's see, 7, 9. So there's a bar dropped in there, and I can just really feel it, because like there's something missing in here. It just doesn't seem to like connect up, right? So just really be careful about leaving out bars in these scores. Like if there's if you feel it's just kind of going on too much and it's just getting ridiculous, then that's one thing. But when there's a specific chord progression kind of a structure, you should have a really good reason for jumping from one to the other, or you should just force the harmony to do something that fills in the hole, right? Or just watch out to make sure that you don't leave out bars in the future. All right, and then this is all just strings against strings. It's all cool. And then just adding little bits of winds. I like it a lot. Also with the bassoon in there. That's very cool. Yeah, and then here I felt that like if you're going to end up with this just really forceful kind of push here, maybe there could have been bigger scoring all the way across, right? It didn't have to, like, just because everything's kind of running down towards the middle and lower register, it doesn't mean that you have to leave out every, you don't have to leave out higher instruments. They could come in an octave higher and rush down and so on. And I think that there could have been more wind support here, the lower strings and so on. And yeah, it just feels like it feels like the balance here is a little strange. Yeah, but it's a good use of your, once again, good use of natural horns here. Yeah, da, 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 da. Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like the instruments playing this chord should almost be like forte piano or something, so that this doesn't get buried by just the sustain, right? If they're all going diminuendo together, then that means that there's a chance that the bassoon and cello line will just get kind of buried in what the horns are doing, right? Okay, all right. So that's pretty much all I've got to say about this. There's a lot of like little tweaking and things like that, and it's the kind of thing where the part of me that is a teacher rather than just a coach. I wish I could sit down with a lot of different entries and their participants, their orchestrators, and talk things over and say, what did you mean here, or how can I help you with that? Did you consider this, and so on, and really clarify things. But I mean, it's this challenge is just to see, it's challenging you to come up with something that you hear, right, and that that to show us where you're at with your orchestration. It is by no means a contest, and it is by no means like a goal that is anything greater than just sending me a score and having me talk about it, right? I mean, of course, there's the chance of building, community building and people talking to each other about their music and getting to know each other more, and making the orchestration online community stronger and so on. I mean, yeah, that's another goal, but like in terms of like actually the goal being that you would be creating this for the purpose of getting it performed, right? Sometimes we see scores getting sent in that are ready to go to the stands, right? If the parts are just extracted. Sometimes we see things that need a little bit of work and so on. So I'm not holding anybody up to the standard of like, oh, you absolutely have to be perfect in every single thing that you do. Not that at all. I think it's just a chance for us both to learn from each other, and I really appreciate the opportunity of looking at your score and to find things in it that I hadn't thought of. There are a bunch of cool things in here, and I hope people see that I pointed them out, and that there were some decisions I didn't make that I think, well, that might have been a good way to go with this and that. I see that in almost every score. So yeah, so I just really appreciate it, Owen. Thank you so much for sending this in a couple of years ago, and for your patience with me in trying to get things together, and still being a part of this, and and I hope that if you just let me know that you saw this, because I don't know if any if people don't comment under their score or send me a message or something acknowledging that they saw my evaluation. I have no way of knowing, right? I was thinking of sending out like an email to everybody once I finish up their different categories, and just like make sure everybody knows that their piece is up and ready to be looked at and so on. But that's just more organizing, which I don't quite have the time for right now. Anyhow, all that aside, thank you so much, Owen, and everybody else out there. I hope that you're leaving Owen some of your thoughts and feedback and plaudits and everything else. And Owen, I hope that you have some time to look at other scores, especially in this dotted brev category that you are a part of. Right? Thanks, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.